Thank you so much, Esgi. And perhaps to start us off, let me start by saying hello, colleagues, and a warm welcome from New York, which promises to be a warm day. And really great to have so many of you online for this Justice Futures CoLab and Community of Practice conversation on justice data. Today, we have an opportunity really for us to engage with one of the most topical issues or subject matters on access to justice, which is really about evidence and data. During the conversation today, we'll try very, very much within the time frame that we have to meet some of the key objectives of our conversation today, which include helping each other to get a better understanding of justice data and UNDP's role in collecting it. I see colleagues from different parts of the globe in terms of UNDP's country presence, and I think it is really critical and important for us to have this very good and common understanding on this. And our second objective of this conversation is really for us to work towards promoting more and better investment in justice data collection, analysis, through UNDP's governance programming at country level, at regional level, and we know already there's also quite a lot happening at global level, and you'll hear from our colleague Mariana with the Oslo Governance Center on some of this work. We are really grateful to have the opportunity as part of the discussion today to learn about some of the existing data efforts at country level to promote and engage, as well as support national statistical systems to produce quality data on governance, broadly speaking, but more specifically on justice. Just to mention very briefly, colleagues, that as many of you already know and are aware, current global trends indicate the widening justice gap and the general global decline in the rule of law. So literally what it means is we have a long way ahead of us before 2030 to be able to close this justice gap. So here we are, while we work on increasing programming efforts on people-centered justice to close the justice gap, there is increasingly the importance for us to measure the progress or retrogression that is happening in order for us to inform policy and decisions that strengthens justice systems to be effective, to be accessible, to be transparent, to be responsive to people's needs and rights. And as UNDP, I think I'm just saying this more for emphasis, because I know you already know as a community of practice that we are committed to people-centered justice. And that people-centered justice work we want to do has to be based on empirical data and evidence. And we know for sure that overall, the data and evidence collection has been a bit patchy. Its use of data for policy has also been a bit patchy across a number of settings that we are working in. So really, as UNDP's rule of law and justice practitioners, we both have an opportunity through the programming we are doing, as well as the responsibility to support efforts on data collection. So the conversation today that we are having will give us really an overall picture on SDG 16 data collection and support, as well as other data that supports SDG 16 on justice through justice needs surveys, data collection, and other methods, and really listening to these practical examples from country offices on how UNDP can do this. I am really pleased that we have 5 brilliant speakers with us. We will share the conceptual and practical information on this topic, and I'll introduce them very briefly. Mariana, who is the governance statistics specialist with the Global Policy Center for Governance in UNDP, based in Oslo. We have Daniela Baba, who is the Director of Research on Access to Justice on World Justice Project. I know as UN justice practitioners, you've heard about the World Justice Project and the index that it produces annually on justice and rule of law. So we are really privileged that we have Daniela as an external expert outside of UNDP, but coming in to share with us this important analysis on justice data collection. Roland Cole, our Chief Technical Advisor with the UNDP Malawi office, is going to speak. So is Marina Ruzi, who is the Gender and Criminal Justice Specialist with our UNDP Timor-Leste office, together with Matteo, who is the M&E Officer for Timor-Leste. So to get us started, because we really want to reserve a lot of time for our engagement, I would request 3 things from you, colleagues. The first one, it would really be great if you could use the chat function to write your name, your title, and your country office so that we get to know who is in the room and we get to interact with each other better. With that said, I realized I started talking and I didn't fully introduce myself and I took it for granted. My name is Revai Makanje Obek and I'm Senior Advisor for Justice and Security with UNDP with the UNDP Global Team sitting here in New York. My second request to you, colleagues, is please do switch on your cameras where you can. It would be great for us to see each other's faces and get to know each other better. And I'm also requesting you where you can, please do use the chat function to raise questions, but ideally do unmute yourselves and let's get talking. Without taking more time from the conversation, I would like to invite Ezgi, our community of practice manager for governance, to run a quick poll to get us started so we can just, trigger an interesting conversation and then we can hear from our speakers. So here we go. Ezgi, do you want to just read out the question and prompt the colleagues to respond?
Sure. Happy to. Thanks, Revai, for the brief introduction. Colleagues, it will be great to hear from you to what extent you're familiar with this team. Are you currently working on justice statistics and data, whether it be criminal, civil justice, or planning to work on justice statistics in the next 3 years? If you could just take a quick yes or no, and you may not be familiar with the situation of the country office at large. Let's give it another 20 seconds, maybe. Over 60% of colleagues have already responded, Revai, and I will be sharing the results with everyone soon.
Fantastic. No, this is good. This is really, really good, I think, to get us started. Yes, over 60% positively saying yes, 11% no, and 26% they don't know. So again, I think the reason why we are also having this conversation is also to bridge also this gap in terms of information and knowledge on this, but also to continue to enhance it. Without further ado, colleagues, I would like to invite Mariana, who is our expert on statistics within UNDP, to start us off with a presentation which will paint the overall global work for UNDP on data collection. Mariana, over to you.
Have I muted myself?
Yes,
we can hear you well, Mariana.
Okay, that's good.
Can you just zoom into the presentation?
Can you see the
it's full screen
well?
now.
Okay, thank you so much to Ezgi, to Revai, and for the very wonderful panel. It's a really great opportunity to be speaking with you. And 62% are working or will be working on access to justice. So that's really impressive. I think that means that you'll be the solution to some of the problems that I'll be showing you today. So at the Global Policy Center for Governance, we work mainly with the SDG 16. And today I'll be sharing a little bit of good news and a little bit of bad news at the same time. On the goal 16, which is where the access to justice part of access to justice is, we have no targets on track at this moment. So of all the targets that all of us, our states, our institutions committed to themselves for us to improve, we are not on track. We are either very moderate progress, marginal progress, or we were stagnating. And in some regions, we are actually regressing. So there is a lot to be done. That means that there's a lot of, we have already done a lot, but there's much more to be done for us to achieve what we need to achieve. But I must say that this statistic that we see now only show part of the picture. What we've seen since the adoption of the goals in 2015 and the respective indicators, we had almost no data official data on SDG 16, including access to justice. It might seem that, okay, these numbers, we now at 50% of countries having some data on SDG 16. It is quite impressive if we consider our starting point. Again, this will depend. In some regions, we have more data, much more data. This is only for goal 16, it's not for all goals. So Central Southern Asia, we have a little bit more data. Our world average is 51. It's yesterday, it changed from 50 to 51. And in some regions, it's around 32% with Oceania and small island island states having the lowest percentages. But again, this is not entirely negative view because we have to also consider our starting point. And one of the things that I would want to share with you colleagues, UNDP colleagues, is that one major push that came for us to be where we are today is one of the work from colleagues that were presenting after me, but also there has been a continuous and enormous investment in improving the international standards, improving how we measure, having a better understanding of how we measure. And one of the major achievements that all of us that work in statistical community have had last year, it was that governance statistics became official statistics. And this was passed by the United Nations Statistical Commission. It was already, all of us know how statistics are official statistics, education statistics are official statistics, but governance wasn't. The governance was never considered a domain that we need to produce. And inside what the Statistical Commission has classified as governance statistics, we have what's called now a subdomain. This is in the classification of statistics. Of course, these the terms have different meanings in different contexts. Inside governance, the statistics, we have access to justice, and inside access to justice, SDG 16 give us 3 key indicators for the measurement. This is 6331, which is violence reporting that UNODC is a custodian. 1632, not 23, which is on sentenced detainees, UNODC is custodian, and 1633 that us UNDP have a responsibility for. And these are the lists that UNDP is responsible, because this is a very good opportunity for me to speak a little bit. We have the access to dispute resolution mechanism, which is the other side of access to justice in the criminal, which is 1631. And we have another very important indicator, which is representation and participation in the public in the judiciary. While for this last indicator, which is an administrative record indicator, we have around over 120 countries, data on around 120 countries. For 1633, we actually have only data for around 10, 12 countries, coming with data that has been officially reported and is part of the global database. And I'm not going to go through this because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted this slide to be here for you to see. And when we're trying to measure access to the dispute resolution mechanism, this is the type of disputes that we're trying to measure. Land, family, housing, government payments. And you'll see this more on the methodology, which I'll share in a bit in the chat. So how do we collect? First thing, we send a request for all countries. This is the NSOs that work in the country that you are at this point. We send all of them a request to get inside a reporting platform that we own. The country offices, by request, we can give them access to the information that was reported in their country. And every year, once a year, we send this huge global call for data to all country offices for them to to all the National Statistics Office for them to insert the information they have in their respective countries. So this is how the information gets to us in the UNDP Global Policy Center. But we see that also with some cases, we just don't have the data. So the countries don't have data to provide to us. Because of this, the UNDP, UNODC, OSHR created a survey that can be used, implemented as one, and it gives almost all survey-based indicators on the SDG 16. So it gives the physical violence, psychological violence, sexual violence, and violence reporting. So this is the access to justice part. It gives the access to justice, but it also gives other indicators that might be very relevant to analyze together with the access to justice. For instance, discrimination or satisfaction public services or the trafficking person. And the methodology is adapted to respond to other possible data needs that the country has. Because of course, what we want is the countries to report, but more important, much more important than just reporting the data, it is important that the data is used, that actually is informing the programming, the national strategies, the development plans that you have in your respective country. I will not go through the methodology, but we just wanted for you to know that you have this solution. The Global Policy Center with the partner will very interested in supporting where possible. This is my last slide because I have 8 minutes and I'm already at 7:55. It's just that some of the common constraints that we are reported to this is too politically sensitive. It's too hard to implement. There's not much interest. And what I want to tell is that from where we sit, we see a lot of interest in the data on access to justice data. And it's not as politically sensitive as sometimes we might think. The countries themselves come to us and ask support and ask to be guided or ask for instructions. Before this meeting, I was responding questions to a specific country office and RCO, and then I saw in Asia, they wanted to know how do they do the access to the resolution mechanism questions in their respective country. So I hope we'll have more discussion as we go, but this is just like a small teaser of what is our responsibility, and that we have a responsibility as UNDP, as a custodian of 1633, of measuring following the global standards. And I thank you so much, and I think I overused my time by 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana, for giving us that global overview of where we are when it comes to SDG 16 indicators, broadly speaking, but more specifically for SDGs that are related to justice, and 16.3.3 being particularly important and special, colleagues, because it is what we are calling the people-centered indicator, and it really speaks to the experiences of engagement with justice systems from the perspective of the users, and then its criticality. With that said, I'm going to invite Daniela. Daniela is the Director of Research on Access to Justice with the World Justice Project. Such a privilege to have you, and over to you to speak to us about the work of the World Justice Project and also how we can better connect also with your work in our aspirations as UNDP in strengthening data collection, use, and analysis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Revi. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. So I would want to share a little bit about WJP's experience in making justice data useful for justice programming, and hopefully this will help inspire a little bit, or tease, as Mariana was saying, exactly how justice data can achieve this goal beyond, well, we'll get to it. So as probably you know, World Justice Project is a long-standing producer of justice data. There are several ways in which we have seen our data used. Yes, of course, country-level data matters, but we have seen ways in which global and regional data have been used by country actors to sort of to incentivize them and catalyze their own questioning on how to improve their justice programming. So yeah, as I said, I hope that we can inspire the conversation in this way. Justice data, as I was saying, it can be used as to build awareness. The Justice Gap is a really good example of how it has call to action. It can also be used to track progress, look through as for example, the SDG 16.3.3 is one example in which this can happen, and more at the country level, we can get into that. And as I was saying, it can also create incentives for reform through the publicity of outcomes, because actors do care, or do in many cases care, about how they stand in the region and globally. And this can happen at several levels. We have observed, for example, in the Mexico Rule of Law Index, how subnational actors also care about these dynamics. We all know people-centered justice approach. These justice ecosystems are not monolithic. So even though like high-level actors might not always be on board, there's ways for exploring within the justice ecosystem possible champions that it's possible to partner with. And this, collaboration or engagement can occur, yes, during the release of the data or the findings, but also before that, when injustice indicators are being co-created and to sort of inform, design, monitor the policy making itself or the justice programming itself. And beyond government actors, justice data can also be a conversation starter with the wider population and civil society. So to provide examples of these, we start, for example, with exactly SDG 16.3.3. Yeah, I think I said that right. That indicator, there was like this challenge about how feasible it was to assess the indicator. And WJP implemented legal needs surveys and kind of sort of provided the proof of context to support the idea that this could be measurable. Of course, there have been a ton of improvements, as Mariana has just emphasized, but there's this way in which there was this collaboration that was able to just make the case that this was feasible to assess. Now, turning to the flagship program of the World Justice Project, the Rule of Law Index, which I believe, in case you're not familiar with it, I invite you to take a look at it in our webpage. And the Rule of Law Index, what it does is it takes 8 factors, really briefly. It assesses the degree to which the state refrains or constrains itself from abusing the population and the degree to which it protects the population's safety and provides access and covers their access to justice or solves their legal problems. And so what we have seen with country actors is that because there are private sector users who use the Rule of Law Index data to inform investment decisions, country actors have reached out, for example, to the World Justice Project to try to understand how they can improve their scores so that they are not at the bottom of the index. And this operates also in a different way. So next week you will see, and I can give you a little bit of a preview. We are also trying to understand from those countries that have seen improvements in some of the factors of the index, try to bring in actors at that level, at the country level. So next week we will see interviews, like in-depth discussions and open discussions with a civil society actor from Poland, someone from the Ministry of Justice of Zambia, and someone from the Supreme Federal Court in Brazil, because factors related to these sectors, where these representatives belong to, have seen improvements over time. So the idea is try to understand, okay, in the experience of the population, that's very important. How people experience the rule of law, we have seen an improvement. What have you done recently to sort of explain these improvements? This is something that we have experimented with widely at the subnational level. The Rule of Law Index at the subnational level in Mexico, the team has already kind of implemented this strategy of bringing in actors from different sectors, different parties, which is very relevant in the current context, to sort of understand, okay, in these improvements that you have seen, what else, like the population has observed and the experts have observed, what have you done in labor? What have you done? And that index does have like a component that is very strong on labor law. What have you done in terms of interinstitutional coordination? And so now we have subnational actors in different sectors following the index to try to understand what they can improve. Now, more concretely, the Rule of Law Index indicators have also been used to capture, for example, in the Sustainable Development Goals report. We have seen, for example, it was probably a little more than a month ago that we had the Sierra Leone Justice Sector Strategy. And we already have seen that in the indicator framework, they captured SDG index report, but that is data that also comes from the World Justice Project. So it can be reflected way more directly on tracking justice sector reform strategies. And this is taking into account once data has been produced, how it can be used. But the thing is, justice actors can also be part of co-creating the indicators themselves, selecting jointly with technical experts, academics, and government actors, the indicators that matter for them. This is the example of the open justice metric in Mexico, where we can talk a little bit later about how those entry points were kind of facilitated for us to have this collaboration. But there was a collaboration with the National Access to Information Office and civil society actors and academic actors, where the idea is that this metric basically establishes a baseline in the state of openness of public justice institutions across levels of government in Mexico. And after the fact, through intensive engagement with key justice institutions, WJP has utilized this tool to catalyze the co-creation of state-level open justice policies in 6 Mexican states. And now other countries, it's worth to say, are kind of interested in replicating the experience. And so this is something that involves actually the UNDP country office in Dominican Republic. There are ongoing conversations, somewhat advanced, for us to provide technical assistance and co-create with the UNDP country office and the judiciary of the Dominican Republic justice indicator frameworks to support the adaptive justice strategy of the judiciary. And so that was a little bit of an overview. We can discuss a little more in detail later, but before, I think I'm a little bit over time, maybe by a minute or so. But just to conclude, these are the set of actors that we have had some collaboration in different settings, includes National Statistics Office, judiciaries and ministries of justice, national human rights commissions, academia, civil society organizations, and transparency institutions. And now turning to you all, we would want to hear, and I think Ezgi is going to prompt the question of which national partners do you collaborate or support on data statistics? Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Daniela, for that presentation. So maybe over to you, Ezgi, to administer the poll, because I think this is an important question, colleagues, for us to get a sense of whom we are working with.
Super. Thanks, Ravai, and thanks, Daniela, for the detailed overview. Yes, I am looking at the responses now. Which national partners do you collaborate and support on data and statistics? Please select all that apply, so don't feel limited by any means. I see that about 56% of colleagues have responded, so maybe we'll give it another 20 seconds. And if anyone is having technical issues reviewing the poll or responding to the poll, please do let us know, just for future reference. Okay, so what we see is majority of the colleagues who are working with national partners, they indicate that they're working directly with Ministry of Justice and other institutions in the justice sector. That's 70% of respondents, quite dominant, and CSOs and national statistics offices. Those are the primary partners, seems. And then we also have a few colleagues, few experts who suggest that they're working with national human rights institutions as well. Can everyone see the results of the poll? I'm just sharing to make sure that everyone can see. Okay, super.
Yeah.
Over to you, Ryan.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Ezgi, for doing this part. So colleagues, I would like us to just take a quick pause in terms of our presentations from our experts for us to have a conversation, to get more clarification, make your own contributions just based on this overall very broad framing of the work that we are doing as UNDP at a global level, as well as the work that is being done by the World Justice Project in terms of really some of the work that is being done to slightly move the needle when it comes to data collection, to data analysis, as well as its use, but also some of the challenges and the constraints that are being faced But also, I think quite importantly, has been highlighted from this poll, is really this huge range of actors that are part and parcel of this process. With that said, please feel free to raise your hands, your digital hands or your physical hands. I'm just checking in also with Sean and Esgi, who are helping and supporting with this process to identify colleagues online who may be wanting to speak at this point. So colleagues, please feel free. It's an open conversation. It's a dialogue amongst colleagues so that we can continue to support and help each other on this very important and topical point of conversation and discussion. Sean Esgi, is there any hand that is raised at this point? I don't see any hand.
Revi, perhaps after the country office experiences, we will have a bit more.
We'll have a little bit more coming. Absolutely. So colleagues, I think we can keep the ball rolling in terms of the presentations, but please, again, to emphasize, it's an open conversation. In case you feel it better to put your question in the chat, we can always read it from the chat. So please, let's keep those questions, points of clarifications coming as we go along. I would like to now use this opportunity to invite our first country office presenter, Roland Cole, Chief Technical Advisor with the UNDP country office based in Malawi. We really appreciate your presence, Roland, at this conversation, and we are all really looking forward to hearing of this brilliant work that you are leading in Malawi. And I see your presentation is up, but it's not in slide mode as yet, so perhaps you may want to do that, and then you can start your presentation. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, it's good afternoon from Lilongwe, Malawi. It's a pleasure to be here and to just to throw a few perspectives on the work that is currently ongoing in Malawi. So just by way of an overview, this is basically about the conversation which I just wish to share our experiences in Malawi, the country office in developing an online digital data-based system. And this system was geared towards measuring and tracking sexual and gender-based violence cases. The system is known as the Observatory Hub, and I will take you through the broad objectives of the initiative and the approach that was necessary in achieving success, the results, and how data has been relied on to promote efficiency in the justice sector and to influence policy and change. And then I'll reflect on some challenges and how these were addressed. And then, basically the question of how are we moving forward and what is it that, we have been able to change. But I want to start by, just stating that in terms of the context, Malawi is a developing country, third world country. And in terms of digitalization, most of the people that we work with are basically do not ordinarily, use computers or laptops, etc. So the transformation has been, very serious and very critical. And most of them, apart from the use of their mobile phones, do not use computers, on a daily basis. So start with our objectives. And the question is, what is it that we wanted to achieve? First was to track cases with efficiency, and this involves in measuring especially of backlog. How do you ensure that, or how do you know the state of your criminal justice system? You need to measure. You need to measure backlog and rate of disposal, etc. Second, and very critical, was to enhance justice for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence. Essentially, the background of the Observatory Hub was that it was established and constituted under the EU Spotlight project originally, and then UNDP was in charge of that aspect. And after the project, we have continued, expanding, the hub. So it's about tracking specifically such kind of cases. And then third relates to how do we ensure that we improve transparency, giving people access and allowing the public to be able to track cases, increases stakeholder and public confidence in the justice system. And then second, fourth, streamlining data and managing the process. With the digitalization and your process reengineering, you're able to shorten, the time that, cases and processes take within the criminal justice system, but you're able to bring in analysis and share data among the various components of the justice sector. As I mentioned previously, within the context of Malawi, the kind of approach needed to be contextualized to ensure that the system takes off the ground in the first place, but also that it will be owned by the users, but also that it becomes sustainable. So as opposed to a huge monolithic system that you would probably have, the approach within the context was that first the system should be homegrown and nationally owned. And what this means is that it is usually important to have nationals, where you have the capacity which actually exists in Malawi to develop the system, rather than having a company come in which will probably disappear, as has been the case in most third world countries, disappear with the source code, and then at the end of the day, the users are unable to access the system. And then second, of course, it needs to be country specific, which means that, in terms of looking at the challenges, the low internet connectivity, in terms of, the system, we adapt using open source mechanisms. Third, the issue of managing change, and that is the greatest obstacle. People constantly do not want to adapt. And that is why, in terms of development, the issue of co-creation is very important, ensuring that the users are on board while the system is being created. And then fourth, of course, it needs to be, the human rights-based approach, ensuring that it proactively is gender responsive. And then fifth, it needs to be iterative. So instead of having a big bang kind of solution, we go progressively and pilot. Have feedback sessions, management sessions, and then of course the whole issue of monitoring and ensuring that periodically we bring in users to give feedback in terms of the system. What all this does is that you involve all the users and ensuring that in terms of capacity, as the system is developed, that those that will be using, those that will be managing, those that needs to be troubleshooting in the institutions, including the ICT department, are all involved, and that you train, master trainers of ICT, judges, etc., who will be able to scale up and roll out the training to the rest of the institutions. So, so this is what the Observatory Hub does. It collects collection of data, analyzes data, does reporting, but also manages case management in terms of tracking and progressing individual cases, and also ensuring that issues of the referral system is in place, but also identifying the issue of backlog. And this is what the system looks like. So it starts with mostly the victim support unit at the very local level. And you have the Ministry of Gender, the judiciary, health workers, all collecting data at what is called traditional authority, which is equivalent to the villages in Malawi, and cascading this data to the Observatory Hub, which is housed at the National Statistics Unit. And from here, it is transmitted to various institutions, but also into a dashboard which is relied upon for analysis. But also important is that our next phase is to ensure that we have a sustained connectivity with institutions such as the judiciary, to ensure that there is tracking of cases and people as they go through the system. Of course, the usual challenges are issues relating to limited internet and quality of data. So with relation to issue of internet, what I've been able to do is to establish a system that works offline, which means that even when you don't have internet, you could still upload. And when the internet connectivity comes on, all the data transmits to the hub. So this is appropriate in terms of the context that we have. Of course, quality of data and connects with the issue of capacity building. We continuously, mostly on a quarterly basis, have hand-holding sessions, and wherein we work very closely with those who input the data. What this means is that we are not in a stage where we have left them behind or abandoned them, but we continue to work progressively, but also have what we call sparring sessions where various institutions come together and speak to the issue of their challenges and challenge each other to do better. Question of sustainability is always an issue, and this is one of the reasons why we have opted for the open source system we're in terms of when once UNDP pulls out, it is cheap to manage. But we have also signed partnership agreements with local service providers such as Airtel, which are able to continue to provide bandwidth when once we're out of the picture. Coordination and collaboration, getting institutions to speak to each other, that forms an obstacle to progress in the system because in terms of the institutions, the question is how do they link up and what information and data does, for instance, the judiciary have in respect of what the police have, and we are at the stage of signing MOUs to be able to take care of the levels of accessibility. And of course, I think I'll try to round up in terms of now, just in terms of what has changed and what I've been able to achieve. So the dashboard and the observatory hub over the years, I think probably this analysis is from probably 2 months ago, 12,020 cases updated since the 2002, but this should have increased by now. So the online platform has enhanced data collection of GBV cases, and this has helped identify, trends and patterns of crime, hotspots of GBV, leading to, better information and decision making and targeted interventions. So this is very important, especially from the policing and from the prevention perspective. Second, the analysis, the platform has provided improved data analysis and capabilities, thereby enabling stakeholders to gain deeper insights of the root causes, but also evidence-based policy making in terms of effectively combating GBV. In realistic terms, the data has been very useful, for instance, in terms of treaty reporting and the analysis that is required and evidence in relation to the CEDAW or the CRC reports to the African Commission, but also in the development of the recent end child marriage. This analysis has been useful, but also has been useful in terms of programming, not just from the perspective of UNDP, but also other agencies, including UNICEF, that has expressed a lot of interest in the system. Tracking and monitoring, again, from a statistical point of view, we're able to track and monitor individual cases, and including as the progress. This is important for coordinating support services for survivors and ensuring more timely assistance. So the tracking also of cases means that you're able to identify backlog, and when once backlog is identified, the judiciary and the other justice sector are able to respond. For instance, deployment of judges, deployment, to put their resources in terms of sending or deploying mobile courts, legal aid practitioners, prosecutors, etc. But this also has formed very good baseline in terms of, and setting targets in terms of programming. And then finally, in terms of advocacy and prevention, the hub is important in terms of raising awareness of the level and the rate of GBV, but also promoting gender equality. And it provides a platform for sharing information, resources, best practice in the bid to end GBV. As I end, just want to state that we are in the phase of expanding to other aspects, including analysis and data statistics for other institutions such as the MHRC, the Ombudsman, in terms of collecting data of grievances and human rights violation. I will stop here in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roland, for that detailed presentation. And I think it truly crystallizes what it really means to program on at country level to support both the actions and policy work, but also at the same time, I think, to facilitate data collection and data analysis that is critical for informing the policy and the programming. So huge congratulations, by the way, honestly, on the data observatory and also the way that you've managed to keep it going beyond the existence of a project, but also at the same time continuing also to expand and connecting the different institutions. Because I think the key point that keeps coming through is really about creating an ecosystem for data collection. I would like us to move on to our next duo of presenters from our Timor-Leste country office. And I know it's very late, your time. And so thank you so much for staying up late in the night for you to be able to make this presentation for us. So I will hand over to Mariana and Matteo to take it over. I don't know who is going to start first, but over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start. I'm Marina. I'm the Gender and Criminal Justice Specialist here at UNDP Timor-Leste, and I'm going to share that with Matteo Barduani, who can introduce himself. But I'm trying to share my presentation and I can't, so maybe if Lady can help me.
Sure, Marina, if you look at the bottom of the page, you should see a green icon that says share screen.
Yeah,
but,
no,
I see Larry is sharing. Okay, super.
Okay.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks. Well, so basically in this little time we had, we really just wanted to give a brief introduction to what we have been doing here at Timor-Leste. And then Lady, if you can go to the next slide. Just to give you a little bit of context, Timor-Leste as well as Malawi, and it's interesting listening to Roland because a lot of the challenges we're having here are very similar. But basically Timor-Leste is a 25-year-old nation, so of course all the governance institutions are still under development and strengthening, and UNDP has been supporting them since its independence. About access to justice specifically, just to give you the context, we have a few institutions and actually a quite sufficient, let's say, legal framework. So we have the Public Defender's Office that provides legal aid for all the citizens that might need representation. We also have the Office of the Prosecutor General for criminal matters. CSOs that are actually a great partner, both in terms of legal representation, but also in terms of legal guidance, going through the system with especially the victims of GBV, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest issue currently in Timor-Leste. And also we have an ombudsman for human rights. We have had recent changes in the legal framework to increase the participation of people, especially on civil matters. And we're still under implementation, but it has been going well. However, we do face a few gaps, specifically regarding the limited access to legal representation. First, we have very few legal professionals, lawyers. The Public Defender's Office has only 35 professionals, which in a country, even though it's a small country, it does represent a lot of work for those professionals. And it does mean that we have a lot of cases logged, and it has been a process to support them in this process. Also, we have a lot of geographic barriers and cultural aspects, especially regarding the informal justice system, which is currently still the most important one for the Timorese people in general. If you can go to the next one, Larry. In terms of the data collection, we have been working with them for quite some time, but still we do face some challenges, especially because even though the main legal institutions do have their own systems, there is a limited access to both capacity of the personnel, but also in the data collection itself, and they're not really used to sharing this information, either between the institutions, but also with the public in general, which has been pointed out as a big issue, especially to support them with further programming. So the data we do have available mostly comes from the partners, especially civil society organizations and international organizations, and highlighting our own role as UNDP, but also UN Women and the Asia Foundation, who was responsible for some of the surveys we mostly use. Right now, we actually have an interesting data situation, which is one of the, as I mentioned, one of the biggest issues we have in terms of access to justice is gender-based violence. And currently we are under a very lively dispute between which methodologies should be used to measure this, this phenomenon. So we currently have a demographic health survey that has been implemented 10 years ago and is going to be implemented again this year by the National Statistics Institution. But there has been a dispute to have more frequent surveys using the WHO methodology, and this has been a negotiation with the government. And as I mentioned, the main challenges we do face are the limited capacity and resources, and also one specific, which is the gaps in legal identification. Currently, we are implementing the notary service, especially for birth certificates, but right now, due to the barriers and everything, most of the legal identification most people have are actually baptism registrations from the Catholic Church, and Timor-Leste is a Catholic country. So this also has been pointed out, especially by the police, as a major issue, not only accessing justice, but also other public services. If you could go to the next one. Some of the opportunities before I give the floor to Mateo are UN has an ongoing joint program to work with the legal institutions to develop one specific system, data system, that could have more potentiality for transparency and sharing this data, but it's mostly focused on gender-based violence and child protection. So this is a work in progress that is very promising. And Mateo will explain a little bit better, but we also have been using as tools justice public perception surveys, which have provided a lot of interesting data for programming. So please, Mateo, you have the floor. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marina. Good evening, colleagues. So basically, a lot of the judicial data and promoting what's been going on in the judiciary has been part of 1.5 year work that we've been doing. Recently, we also had publications and surveys in the courts, mainly focused on gender-based violence. And we see this transition in the judiciary from a lot of public awareness and launching of publications. And we see their change from courts prioritizing victims' information and transparency. So this has been over the course of 4 years. But now we're seeing some of the results, especially in the decisions. So also providing civil compensation, even explanation of some of these decisions is very crucial in Timor-Leste, especially as 30 to 40% of the population is illiterate. So often they're handed a piece of paper and they have no idea what it means. So this is part of the process of accessing the data, accessing information, understanding what people who use the judiciary, who need access to justice, what do they need to inform themselves and to better adapt themselves to the situation. Next. Another aspect we've done is work with the Ombudsman of Human Rights. So we did a perception survey. This year has been the 20th anniversary of the institution, but only 1/3 of the population actually know what they are and what their service is, which is very crucial for an institution that promotes access to justice and human rights. A lot of these issues stem from especially barriers from like accessing geographical limitations, financial limitations. And so part of this perception survey not only was done in collaboration with the Ombudsman, which promotes sustainability and also provides them the feeling of their ownership of this information. So it has promoted more institutional interest in providing awareness, ensuring access to justice, and access to information is shared across the country. Yeah, next. And lastly, we're working with informal justice and the formal justice system. So we're having a project working with the newly established Land and Property Commission. It's only about 1-2 years of its mandate. And so what we see is a lot of the land disputes, about 10% of the land is in dispute right now. And so their work is very much connected to even the national statistics institutions, as they hold a lot of crucial information on land registry and land disputes, which is then supposed to be provided to the Ministry of Justice, which gives the competency to LPC. But due to flooding and other issues, the data is very inaccessible right now. And that's resulted in the Land and Property Commission actually still conducting its administrative decisions and mediation function, but they're still being disputed in courts. So it shows the importance of even having the proper data to ensure that service providers as well as CSOs are able to adapt and inform themselves strategically, especially on what the needs are of the people of Timor-Leste. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Rebai, I think you're muted.
Rebai, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sincere apologies. I was saying thank you so much, Matteo and Marina, for the presentation, and in particular for really sharing, of course, some of the challenges of supporting a 25-year-old nation, right, on institution strengthening and institution building. And obviously, I think there will obviously be quite a lot of challenges, but already some of the innovations I think that we are coming up with are really already beginning to bear fruit. I really liked to perhaps to emphasize one particular point, which was mentioned really on the connection between legal identity, the link to services, but also the links to data. And again, I think this is part and parcel of why I think as UNDP, we do have quite a good advantage, because given the breadth and depth of our corporate mandates, I think it is important that we critically connect all these many components and see how all of that comes together when it comes ultimately to what we mean by supporting comprehensively access to justice, but also comprehensively governance systems as a whole. I would like us to do one last quick poll. As we do this one last quick poll question, I think we have one more, right, Ezgi? I would also want to invite our colleagues, please, to raise your hands and let's start having a conversation. If you have any questions for our colleagues we have presented, but also if you have your own country examples that you want to share, please do feel free to chime in. Over to you, Ezgi, on the last poll while we get our colleagues ready with their questions.
Super, thanks, Ravari. We have only 15 minutes remaining, so hopefully this will not take too long. But it will be great to hear from colleagues and what they perceive to be one of the biggest challenges associated with producing data on justice statistics in their given context, country, region. And of course, this question is more applicable for those who are already working on this issue, but also based on the presentations you've heard, if you have a sense as to what would be the biggest challenge. Is it lack of coordination among national ministries and entities? Is it technical capacity and/or inadequate data recording? Systems, the discrepancy between international versus national monitoring requirements, or insufficient methodological guidance from international agencies. And lastly, lack of insufficiency of funding dedicated to this work. So far, 45% of colleagues who are participating have responded. So maybe we'll give it another 10 seconds. It's a long question. And here we're seeking answers for the biggest challenge, not all that apply. Okay, perhaps we can wrap up and share with everyone the results. Over to you for analysis, paralysis, or
yeah, analysis paralysis. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ezgi, for that. And clearly, I mean, I'm just gonna, because I was trying to take a screenshot of what is coming out. And clearly, I think in terms of measuring data on access to justice, the point around technical capacity and adequate data recording systems and tools looks like one of the major key challenges that colleagues are facing. I think with 53% of respondents indicating that this is critically important. And perhaps, again, Mariana, Daniela, and of course, the global and regional teams in UNDP, maybe we do have quite some hands on our work in terms of really making it clear and supporting country teams in terms of how to be able to do this and support their national institutions. I see that there is a hand up, and Omar, please do unmute yourself, and if you can also open your video, that would be great. Please come in and ask your question or make your contribution. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rewai, and thank you to the colleagues. It's very nice to see you all, and congratulations for the the work that has been done. I mean, what has been presented by Malawi, also by Timor-Leste. I'm very glad that in Malawi the application is moving forward. We had a very early discussion with the colleagues there, and we've given them some of the ideas we have from Palestine experience on the Mizan 2 system, and I can see gradual implementation, in-house development, and open source are some of the things we've discussed, and I'm very glad to see this materializing in the system. Also on the issue of Timor-Leste, it's very interesting to see some similarities in terms of the approach. Here I would like to just maybe put emphasis on piloting, and the way we've done it in Palestine has always been piloting a one court at a time, so like one level of the court, like conciliation, and then moving to first instance and so on, but working across all cases, not a specific case, and then later on incorporate specialization. And it's very interesting to see the other model that has materialized in the case of Malawi and Timor-Leste, where the piloting was on a specific case addressing a specific need, because also this comes with comprehensive data that the system can generate. So this is really an interesting model, and it will be good to see moving forward if it improves or enhances the expansion of that model, or it would be a hurdle, and emphasis might be more toward across court, across all cases type. So really it will be interesting to see in the future and continue that discussion. On the poll, actually, that's another thing that I felt it was a bit missing in both presentations, and I would like to see if anything's been done on that. It's actually on data and data entry, because these systems, like Roland was talking about, the polls that he showed, or the analysis that he showed, and he said this is from a few months ago, so the information would have changed. And that's really interesting because systems, from our experience, can only be functional if they are fed data. And usually this is time consuming. And most of the resistance we get from the national counterparts is on entering data and being able to keep up. I mean, they talked in Timor-Leste about a very limited number of people in the prosecution. And, without sufficient support from UNDP to improve data entry, sometimes we kind of give them the candy, but we don't help them basically digest it in a way.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. Finally, also another hurdle that wasn't mentioned in the poll was the issue of unified classification of cases. Very much data can be confused and reports can be confusing if there hasn't been enough emphasis on bringing together prosecutors, judges, and lawyers to agree on classification of cases. So I think that could be added in the next time we have a poll on that. Thank you very much, all.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Omar, for that analysis. And I think always the examples and the best practices, lessons and challenges arising out of the work you've done in Palestine on Mizani always remain relevant and critical, right, in terms of South-South learning and informing some of the work that we are doing. And I think a key point that keeps coming through and is of emphasis, again, capacity development. Having an ecosystem approach and having systems that continue to speak to each other, leverage on each other, and also in ability to share information and data. I'll go over to Pepi, and I see there are 2 more questions in the chat. So I'm going to direct my speakers also to the chat so that you can see 2 questions that are there. But I'll get to Pepi first, then to the chat.
Thanks so much, Rebai, and thanks for the very interesting presentations. I have a brief question to Daniela, and I wanted to ask about data collection in conflict and crisis settings. Have you been able to continue collecting data for your index in these kinds of settings? And if so, it would be really interesting to hear if there's any good case studies that maybe some of the other conflict and crisis settings could follow. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pepi. Julie, I'd seen your hand up. Perhaps it's better if you can then just speak to your 2 questions. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. I got a message saying maybe I should just take the mic. So I think Omar actually asked quite a bit of what I was trying to get at with that data collection, right? We've got a lot of issues of remote areas where oversight is very difficult, intentional human error, accidental human error, just based on a lack of understanding of the systems that they're using. So I was just wondering what kind of quality controls are being implemented through the actual institutions themselves in order to make sure that that kind of bias or that the quality is maintained at a certain level. And the second one was, Roland, you in particular, you mentioned the fact that there was some response to the analysis of trends through mobile courts and assignment of different justices to different areas and whatnot. As well as legislative reforms, but oftentimes these require bigger budgets, and that is not always available within the countries that we're working in. And UNDP often has to take it up. So I'm just wondering if there has been any achievement in either of the 2 countries of kind of getting additional budget based on the needs and being able to advocate for that need for the country to take over the longer term sustainability of these systems. Thanks. Over.
Yeah. Fantastic, thanks. I will get now to our speakers so that they can quickly respond, maybe 1 each, get a chance to address what has come through from the speakers, and then we'll get to conclude our conversation. So starting off with Daniela, then Roland, then Marina and Matteo. Over to you, and Mariana as well, of course.
Thank you so much. So just briefly on the first question, I think that one key, I think it was briefly mentioned before, I think it was Omar who mentioned it, taking a gradual approach, not trying to start, implementing data collection systems throughout the whole system, but more like taking a piloting and pipeline approach is useful. And starting, it's probably obvious maybe, but I think it's good to start from a set of indicators that are crucial and co-create or decide jointly which those indicators are, and then go from there. So that I think that's my 2 cents on that point, although I understand the challenges. And in terms of data collection in crisis settings, yes, the index does continue. Like the countries that are already, I think it's 142 Among them, there are countries that are obviously still in crisis. I don't know the ratio, to be super frank with you. I don't manage that program. But I do know that the qualified responder questionnaires do continue in these settings. And in terms of improvers, I think you would expect that in post-conflict settings that have seen more kind of thorough reform, you would see more improvement. The actual ratio, again, I can put you in touch with my colleague who directs that program. It's not I don't oversee it directly, but I appreciate the question.
Great, thanks. Roland, over to you.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. First, so in terms of quality control, that is very problematic, because we are being contextual here, and officers who actually upload, the data. I mean, in terms of their level of education and competences, they are very, if I may say, very basic. And I mean, I've been to their trainings, and in the present context, you would probably have expected, people who are much more in terms of, the minimum, required quality of education. I would say that I think in the present Malawi context, we are a notch below, and but a few critical issues. So there is a second layer of oversight in terms of quality control, and that is why when once at the village level you have the social workers, making inputs in terms of the data, it then goes to the observatory hub where you have much more a higher level of competence. ICT experts, people probably could try to clean up the data. But also there's another type of inefficiency that can come into the system, in that you sometimes will have multiple reports or multiple sources of reports, and probably someone being brought into the system double and twice. And one of the discussions that we have been having is linking the system with the national registration system, wherein persons could be identified by various aspects in terms of their ID card or biometrics, etc. And therefore that is one area that we seek to strengthen, to have a system wherein double reporting could be flagged. In development contexts, the issue of limited capacity is usual, real, but also in a context where you are in a position to handhold, which we often do, you are sort of in sort of have a clean slate, and I see that as a strength and an opportunity, because you're able to influence and to shape the systems, rather than if you are probably in a context where the system is still being developed. We also do have, as I said, handholding sessions, which we have on a regular basis, where some of our personnel do work very closely with national partners in terms of sharpening their skills. And then on the second issue, the issue of resources, from the national partners, we do often have commitments, but we know that commitment does not often translate into disbursement of funds. And therefore, in terms of the commitment, the question is, do we make that a condition for us to engage? I mean, in some contexts, like for previously, like where I was before here, that was part of the contract that we had with government. We will not engage unless and until we make a commitment and to put in a certain amount. But yes, commitments are often made, but then translating this into reality is problematic. And these are the realities of the situation under which we work. So yes, in terms of the resources, we can never have enough and sufficient resources to be able to accomplish the targets.
Great. Thanks so much, Roland. Marina, and if you want to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Revai. Just a small comment sharing a specific experience regarding Julie's second questions about the financial, using the data to gain more financial support, right? And we had a case here in Timor-Leste with the Public Defender's Office. The data regarding gender-based violence indicated that this is like literally almost 70% of women suffer gender-based violence, and they have a lot of gaps in terms of accessing justice. And this motivated us to do advocacy to increase the mandate of the Public Defender's Office to also represent the victims. And this is a challenge faced in many countries that usually they, of course, give the priority to the defendants. But this actually, like using the data, actually helped them to also demand, and actually they made it earlier this year. This is going to be implemented starting next year, the financial autonomy, because they were under the Ministry of Justice, and now they are also not only administratively, but also fiscally autonomous, and hoping to increase their capacity also in their own ownership of the institution. So I think this is a very relevant question. Thanks, Julie and colleagues.
Thank you so much. And of the panelists, perhaps Mariana, from a global perspective,
Hi.
if you have something to add. And I see a point that also came from the Namibia country office, perhaps again, some of the overall challenges when it comes to how best to do data collection.
Thank you so much. I think one first quick point from, I think the colleague, I don't know if he is in Palestine or was from Palestine, but there's a classification of crimes that will be used for statistical purposes, and that helps harmonize. But it goes through a intense nationalization process until it's fully adapted, so you can produce it. So it has to go through all your codes, all your classifications. It's a long process. Now on quality assurance is a very, very key part, and it's a part that unfortunately we tend to save money on. And it's a part that we cannot save money on because it jeopardizes the entire operation. We really need to go through every step carefully. And sometimes pushing an operation or pushing a solution or creating a half a solution ends up costing the entire project. Either it is a register system or it is a survey. And there are some parts that cannot be negotiable. So I saw that a colleague in the chat mentioned the data security. Very frankly, one of the parts that we end up spending more time when we're preparing a survey is exactly the data security, negotiating the data security, because it's a non-negotiable part. If it's not ready, we will not go to the field, period. If it's necessary to drop, we drop, but data security is essential. So there's not one solution for all countries. In some countries, this is easier to go, and it takes 1-2 meetings. In other countries, it might take 3 months, 4 months. But sometimes one strategy works, other times another strategy works. But this is one of those non-negotiable parts. And if necessary, and we believe that we've made a project and believe that we will not have enough data, that we will not have security, or we don't have the necessary quality assurance, we have to stop. And you have to have the courage to stop the project and not go until it's ready. It's a very tough decision, especially when we have the donor breathing in our neck. I'm talking as UNDP colleagues, but it is sometimes that's necessary, and until we find a solution.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Dear colleagues, thank you so much for making the time to be part of this important conversation. I know we are 5 minutes over our time, but I think just very briefly to wind down on our conversation, I think we've had very key and important aspects. You know, the painting of the global picture. Yes, we have momentum, but we still have a long way to go in terms of collecting the data that we need. From Daniela, clearly making the connections in terms of the importance of engaging with different actors and institutions, and also the different layers of data collection that have been done and can be done and should continue to be done. When it comes to our country office examples, really the importance of treating data collection as a journey. Clearly a story from Malawi as well as from Timor-Leste, but also again emphasizing really the point on how systems for data collection, for rule of law and justice is not very simple. I know initially there was one colleague who also mentioned about also how it is quite political data that we collect on justice and rule of law. So overall, I think our key message is let's start, let's continue to pilot, let's do some of the basics, let's get it right, also from the beginning, but also let's try to learn lessons from other contexts as well. So a huge thank you to all of you for participating, a huge thank you to the speakers that have sacrificed their time to prepare and be part of the process, and a huge thank you also to Sean, who has helped curate this session, really appreciate that, and to SG and for running this community of practice for us, but also very quickly to say this data session is part and parcel of an initiative that UNDP colleagues in HQ had started called Data Thursday. SG has put some links in the chat, so please do connect to those links so that you can see more that was discussed through that Data Thursday series. For us, as a team, both at HQ and at regional level, we will continue to engage with you. Please do not hesitate to reach out when you need any support, but we are continuing to think based on what you have shared with us, what other levels of support we can provide in the level of capacity engagement we need also to really put an emphasis on. Thank you so much, colleagues, and Daniela, brilliant to have you as our external expert in this conversation today. Have a good day, everyone, and a good night to the colleagues in Timor-Leste who stayed late until 11 o'clock to be part of the conversation. Thank you, everyone, and a goodbye.
Thanks a lot, Revi. Thanks.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.